A diagnosis of dementia is one of the things that people fear the most in life. A study conducted in a 2022 at McGill University found that people were more afraid to get a diagnosis of dementia than they were of death. Caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia also takes a significant toll on caregivers, with one retrospective analysis showing 18% of caregivers died before the person they were caring for. Dementia is affecting families nationwide, and its impact is felt by every member of the family. To make things even more pressing, the numbers of newly diagnosed dementia is steadily rising as people are living longer and, unfortunately, with more chronic health conditions that are predisposing them to developing dementia in their later years. This is why I'm so excited to be joined today by Bill Uniowski, co founder and CEO of Zinnia TV, to dive deeper into this topic. But before we begin, a quick disclosure. While this episode will explore a range of technology solutions related to caring for loved ones with dementia, we want to be transparent that one or more of the solutions discussed is associated with our guest's company. This podcast aims to provide a balanced educational overview of the topic, with the goal of building a foundational understanding for listeners to use in everyday practice. As such, every episode will explore other product types and relevant considerations to broaden this foundation. Now, let's get back to our conversation. Welcome to Innovative Aging, a podcast for clinicians who want to stay creative, stay informed, and stay connected to what's possible. I'm your host, Carol Chiang, an occupational therapist with 27 years of experience in rehab and home-based care. I know how hard clinicians work to keep their clients aging safely, whether that means hacking together solutions, testing new products, or thinking 3 steps ahead. If you're passionate about helping your clients function better, but just don't have the time to keep up with all the latest solutions, this podcast is for you. On Innovative Aging, you'll hear practical, energizing conversations with experts in rehab, design, and innovation that can spark fresh ideas you can bring back to the people you serve. Together, we can rethink what it means to age well at home and lead the way in shaping the future of aging. Let's dive in. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you currently interact with clinicians?
Sure. My name is Bill Uniowski, the co-founder and CEO of Zinnia. At Zinnia, we've created a therapeutic TV solution designed specifically for people living with mid to late stage dementia. This is a tool that clinicians, that family caregivers can use to manage behaviors, to ease activities of daily living, and to engage and connect with the person that they support.
I love it. And dementia is such a difficult diagnosis to care for at home and really expensive diagnosis given the amount of money and time unpaid caregivers provide. I know CMS guide model that started last year is working towards solution about this. For those people who don't have experience with this, can you tell us a little bit more about what the guide model is?
Sure. The guide model focuses on a comprehensive coordinated dementia care and aims to improve both the quality of life for people with dementia and reducing strain on their unpaid caregivers. And that will enable people with dementia to remain in their homes and communities, which is the goal. It is a new program. It is a pilot program. It's set to go 8 years, and they're working in conjunction with organizations that have been providing dementia care for a long time, there are also some new organizations that have popped up to try and help bring that comprehensive care navigation and caregiver support and respite and training as part of the whole guide offering. So it's very exciting. For me personally, I think it's great to see that for the first time, there is a program that is providing services and reimbursing clinicians for services that are actually focused on the caregiver and not just the patient themselves or the person living with dementia.
That is so important. I swear, I think that in my experience, I would open the door and the caregiver looked worse than the patient did. So it is so necessary at this time to be, caring for both parties and recognizing this is a 50-50 thing. Like I think about that all the time, that the client is 50% of my responsibility and the caregiver is 50% in there. So, for those listeners who don't have experience treating dementia, can you give us a little bit of an overview and just really why it's really important to be having this conversation right now?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, diagnoses are going up. I would refer anyone interested in learning more to the Alzheimer's Association. Every year they come out with a facts and figures publication, and it's very comprehensive, and it can really set out the challenges and the size of those challenges. So there are over 7 million people living with Alzheimer's and other dementias. They are cared for by over 12 million individual family caregivers who are unpaid and out of the home. The conventional wisdom is that people want to remain in their home as long as possible. And so it really relies on family caregivers to do that job. And as you mentioned as well, the stress and burden on family caregivers is significant. You talked about the potential for a caregiver to die before the person living with dementia um, passes, and that often is more the case of older couples who happen to be caring together. But it's a real significant worry. Caregivers are focused, they're selfless, and they're giving up their time and effort to help the person that they love, and that often means neglecting their own health and not going to the doctor, or having stress, and high levels of stress, or coping with that stress in ways that might not be the most healthy. And so all of these things really increase the burden of caregivers who are an instrumental part of caring for people with dementia across the country. And that's why it's so important to have supports and tools and strategies to help those family caregivers in their day-to-day job, because they wake up every single day and they're caring for the person that they support. And that person, dementia is an umbrella condition that relates to a bunch of different diseases that are, just cognitively changes of the brain. So there's
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, there's frontotemporal dementia, there's Lewy body dementia, and they're all present a little bit differently. But it's just it's understanding the person, their situation, and how best to care for them is so important.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important point, which is that every situation is totally different. I mean, every dementia is different, every kind of dementia is different, every reason behind it. And so it's so important to look at that like one to one, right? And I would even say, taking that one step further, looking at the family dynamics is also really important because I've seen people who are really good with looking at local resources to see what kind of respite care that they can get, to be able to go to the doctor on their own or get their hair done or, just even go grocery shopping without worrying that the person that they left with dementia in the car is going to wander or do something else. And I feel like there's such a need for support for those clinicians for that message to be given to them that, hey, like this is, it's different for everybody. And how you cope with it is okay. How you want to take care of this is okay, but not to hide under the shame. I feel like the ones that hurt my heart the most when I see them are the ones who say, like, I don't want other people to see them like this because they remember them in one way, and I don't want them to see them like this, and I need to hide all that and I need to protect them. And therefore, all the time I have to be there and doing all the things for them. So wow, it's a big thing. And I wanted to tell you a quick story because, being a home health clinician, I would see this so much. And it's really hard these days when people live alone and they don't have like that other caregiver at home. And now we've got friends trying to act as the caregiver, or sometimes they're just not getting the care that they need at all. And I had a client where they were best friends and she would come over every morning and, try to get everything organized. But she had a job also that she had to go to afterwards. And he wouldn't get up at the same time, so she would literally hide his medicine every single day, and he would call her and say, "Okay, where's my medicine?" And she'd say, "Okay, like, look in the second bookshelf, like, behind, like, this X and Y book." And, she was running out of places to hide it, but I thought, "Listen, the problem isn't that isn't like you're running out of places, the problem is that this is an unsustainable situation." And why was she hiding them? Because he didn't remember if he took his meds already, and he would take a second dosage and not remember. And again, like it seems like, oh, well, that's a medicine organizer, or that's even the kind that lock or whatever. But everybody is different. And we tried some of those and they just, they didn't work in that situation. So it's
Yeah. So, focusing on that every situation is different. We often say if you've met one person living with dementia, you've met one person living with dementia because everyone's underlying, diseases might
Yeah.
be different. Their stage and progression could be changing. The strategies and tools and coping mechanisms that worked 3 months ago might not work anymore because that person has progressed on their journey. So it's very important to meet people where they are. Like, where are you now? What are your needs? What are your capabilities? And let's provide for your needs as best we can and allow you to continue with whatever you're capable with to the length that you could. I think it's important, you
Yeah.
mentioned what you referred to as sort of like the stigma around dementia, not wanting people to see people in that way. I think it's very important to preserve the dignity of people. At the same time, you know, caregivers that I've seen that have been successful have been very open to asking for help and telling people, sharing with people to the extent that people are comfortable what's going on and asking for help. And that help could be a phone call to the caregiver to give them, some conversation and to give them a small break mentally. It could be coming over and spending a little time with the person with dementia. Watching a movie together, reading a book, taking them out, bringing food over. Just like little simple things make a big difference to caregivers.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's so true because you think it's like not a big deal, but it really is because they're living this life every single day in and day out, trying to take care of themselves, take care of the person, take care of the house. I mean, that's a lot for anyone to do. You can probably do that for a few weeks when somebody is sick and they recover, from like a hip surgery or something, but dementia is long term. And, this is going to keep going. So people need those check ins and monthly hey, what do you need this month? Okay, we're gonna organize this all out and figure this out for you. Um,
Right.
you know, and I think too, as a clinician, what you were saying about everyone is different. It makes my life difficult also when I go in to see a client, right? Like if I do have an ortho one, I know what to expect. Almost every knee is going to present with similar challenges with getting dressed or being able to get in and out of the bed. But when I meet a dementia patient, I'm really kind of lost. I have to take cues from the caregiver. I have to try to find a way to connect with that person with dementia so that I don't look like a threat. And even still with that, it's difficult. I would say that they're probably some of my more difficult, challenging patients, especially if it's a combination of ortho and dementia, because then my responsibility as an OTP is to range of motion them, and people sometimes don't understand. Well, like, why are you hurting me on purpose? And and really, I don't know that person well yet. Maybe in a few weeks I will, but initially when I'm trying to establish that bond and connection that they will trust me, I don't know where to go. And so I rely a lot on caregivers to help me direct it, but I see the frustration on their faces too that, those things like needing to drink water just to keep away some of these issues, they're struggling with that too. Like, they don't know either, or, like, trying to get them in the shower is hard. So, I'm just curious, are these things that you've heard also by clinicians and families that they're experiencing?
No, absolutely. Family members maybe, there are daily challenges, obviously, but family members have the benefit of knowing their person, and
Mhm.
knowing what their interests are, or that putting on this song always makes them happy. And so let's put that song on before we do these things. Routine is extremely important. And again, since family caregivers are there every day doing the work, they can establish a routine. So,
Yeah.
if they know that they want their person to drink water, because of, people with dementia often might be resistant to drinking water. They might forget. They might thought they just had some. So it's really important to make sure they stay hydrated so they don't get UTIs and other things. Um, but doing it as part of a routine. So we work with caregivers who every day at a certain hour, they have hydration hour, and they pour like 11 o'clock, they're going to pour a glass of water, and they're going to sit together, and they're going to have a couple of sips of water. Zinnia is a video platform. We have videos specific around some of those ADL tasks that help to put people in the more receptive mindset to do those
Yeah.
behaviors. So, The Let's Drink Water video will show a glass being filled and people taking sips. And then suddenly there's dogs drinking water and cats drinking water and babies and whatever it is that we might be able to use to tap into someone to make it feel like that thing that they're about to do isn't bad. There's no worry around it. Like these people are doing it. It's normal. I'm going to do it too. So that's
Yeah.
just one of the ways that our tool helps. But that just generally person-centered care, knowing the person, knowing their preferences, finding ways to work things in and trying to adhere to a routine can be helpful.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think it's so important that when you prime their brain into saying, like seeing it first, and then, oh, okay, like that's what I'll do after. I think that that is really important. And I will say, like, I have definitely utilized some of these tools when I'm in dementia units where, my job is to try to increase exercise because they need mobility. It's hard. It's hard because, traditional therapeutic exercises, all right, we're gonna do 20 arm raises or 10 arm raises, even doing 5 is difficult because at that point, there's no attention left. So I do end up trying to prime these things, and I will show videos, to say, "Hey, like, let's go on a bike ride." There's an app that I use called Bike Labyrinth, and they will they have, like, things where you can bike through virtual biking, but it was meant for virtual biking initially, but they tried to make one that was a consumer one where you could just see things and go through those paths and choose, and one of my favorite ones is like sled dogging because it's not something that people do normally. So I'll say, "Hey, look, like, shall we go on a sled dog thing? And you can take your arms and you can bike with them and go with it. And as you go, then the dog will go faster." And so building out a story in there has been one way that I've found helpful because otherwise I find that if we are just at an impasse where I'm saying, "No, you have to do like 10 arm raises before I can check this off the list," and they're saying, "Look, I don't want to do that." That's really boring. That really helps a lot. And to your point about, drinking water videos before, I think also those bathing ones are super useful. I mean, I think that when you show people taking outdoor showers, outside in the rain and you can envision like how much fun it is, I don't know, doing whatever they're doing. Maybe they're outdoor camping or they're doing something exciting, they're transported into that idea of, "Cool, like, that is fun, that is interesting. Yeah, maybe I will think about getting in that shower." So, priming the brain into thinking about, "Hey, let's try this and see, if that will help." I think it's always worth a try. And I know, like, you've talked before too about, like, other areas that Zinnia can help. Can you give us a bit more, I don't know, detail about how
Sure.
how
Yeah.
clinicians could utilize this to the max?
So one of, we talked about the stress of a family caregiver, and one of the things they need to do is manage agitation that often comes with dementia. So someone could get frustrated or upset or act out. They're called a variety of different things, behaviors, reactions. But oftentimes it's the person with dementia trying to communicate something
Mm,
that they're having a hard time communicating. So something is bothering them, whether it be something in the physical environment or something in their head or whatever. And so helping to manage this agitation is a common challenge for caregivers and clinicians. And what we find is helpful is using our videos to redirect someone away from something that might be bothering them towards something that they enjoy. One example of that is at a senior living community where Zinnia is used. Someone came up to us at a conference and said, "We've got Zinnia in our community, and there's a woman who regularly gets agitated." And in a community setting, that often means that someone is given a dose of an antipsychotic medication to calm them down. And that's what this woman's care plan called for. And overuse of psychotropic drugs is a problem, and it's has a negative impact on the health and well-being of the person themselves. And so there's always a goal to find non-pharmacological ways to calm people down. This
mhm.
caregiver knew that this woman was a pediatric nurse in her career, so she spent her entire life working with babies. And so she thought, let's watch the Zinnia babies video and see if this will help. And so they put on the babies video, and this state of our it's a good time to talk about how our videos work or how we make them. So we really thoughtful about building it at a pace that people with dementia can follow. There's no dialogue to get lost in or a plot. So that therefore it's good for all language backgrounds. And it's slow moving, gently paced, beautiful images. We stay on one image of a baby longer than maybe you or I want to see that baby. But for a person with dementia who processes the world a little more slowly, it helps them to
Mm,
recognize what they're seeing. And so they put this baby's video on, and it was baby's first year. And it starts with the baby in the hospital, and then you see the baby at home and the baby playing and all sorts of things. And within 2 to 3 minutes, the woman had calmed down. She was engaged with the screen. She was reaching out towards it. She was talking and making some cooing noises to the babies. And it calmed her down so effectively that they worked with her doctor to change her care plan so that when she gets agitated, they show her the Zinnia video. And
yeah.
babies worked for her, but and we get asked sometimes, oh, so what video do you use to calm people down? And it's like, well, who are we talking about? What are their interests? What's their background? We did 2 years of research at the University of British Columbia and Vancouver General Hospital. And it resulted in 6 published papers talking about the use of video technology as an intervention for dementia. And at UBC, there was a gentleman admitted for another condition, but he had mid to late stage dementia. He would get very agitated. He'd pull a TV off the wall, and they had a hard time calming him down. So what they did was they put a projector on the ceiling and showed Zinnia full screen on a wall. And for him, he loved cars. And that was his thing. He loved working on cars. He collected cars. And so they put on the classic Cars video and they brought him into that room whenever he was agitated. And suddenly he saw the cars and he was, transformed and transported to another place in his mind where he was with the cars. He loved the cars. He was talking about the cars. And it made life better for all of the people in the hospital who were working with him. And it also made his family really happy to know that there was something out there that could calm him down and take away his agitation.
Yeah,
So
and he's
that
engaged and happy.
Exactly. And so the same type of stuff that can reduce agitation is great for engagement as well. Family members like to watch a video with someone and talk about what they're seeing. If you went on a vacation to Hawaii, watch our Hawaii video and reminisce and connect. And it can be relaxing for the caregiver as well because these are calming and beautiful videos, and we hear from caregivers all the time that they enjoy it just as much as the person living with dementia.
Yeah, and I think that it's great. It gives you a conversation topic to discuss more that you wouldn't have normally on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, if you're going through your daily routine, you wake up, you eat breakfast, you do X, Y, and Z, right? There's no opportunity for you to, I don't know, go out and say, "Well, how was your day, honey?" "Well, this is what happened in my day," right? And so this is giving you other conversation topics to, like you said, reminisce about, which is great, and that, I think, opens the door to a lot of these memories that you're really, working on. You're accessing that cognition, you're giving it exercise, cognitive exercise in there. And there's so much that you said that I've got to respond to. Wow. Like, I mean, the fact that UBC was doing this study, it doesn't surprise me at all because the Canadians track like how much psychotic medications that they are giving. And one of their biggest mandates is to drop that amount. And so they're looking for like, how can I maybe improve sleep to decrease the meds that I need? Or how could I, provide videos or other modalities that are less invasive to get the same kind of calming results, and more importantly, quality of life and dignity, that I'm not just being drugged because, I'll tell you, like, I'm heavily involved in the Parkinson's community being a Parkinson's specialist, and one of the biggest reasons why caregivers won't or just don't wanna think about having to put their loved ones in, community living settings is because they worry about that. They've seen it many times where, the person I had one where, I mean, she was only 5'2", her husband was 6'5" something, right? And he was prone to these outbursts, and the family was really worried that she would get hurt, and not intentionally. I mean, he loves her, but he just doesn't know what he's doing at that particular moment. And, when they put him in a community because they really just had no choice at that time, it made her cry because she saw him there like a zombie, and she just thought, like, how could this be, like, how could this be it? That the only solution is to drug him because the staff are also concerned about their safety. So I'm really excited to see that there are more solutions, a range of solutions for dementia coming out that are going to address this, that are not just medication based and not just taking away somebody's ability to be them anymore. I'm wondering, like, have you heard about, like, other solutions that can also be something that people can use to, I don't know, help address some of these aggressions and engagements?
Sure, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, ranging from physical things that, like, they're little kind of fidget gadgets, and other things that then people can kinda touch and play with, for multisensory. Sometimes, whether it be kind of little toys or even like an apron that has, like, buttons and zippers and ribbons and button and all sorts of things on that people can kind of whatever kind of physical fixation they are having, like they can touch something and do something and zip them, and it keeps them busy. Um, Non-technical, right? It's just a thing, a product. You see people using baby dolls in a variety of different ways, which it harkens back to if the person was a mother, like that's a period of their life that
Yeah.
when you're in dementia. Um, One of the things is sometimes you can't remember things that are happening currently, but your memory resides somewhere else at an earlier portion of your life. And so that's why you have people kind of asking questions about maybe relatives who have died. Oh, when's so and so coming to see me? When's so and so coming to see me? Well, they're living in a period in their head that that person was alive and well. So you know, giving someone a baby doll who is kind of in their sense of the time when they were a parent brings a lot of comfort. And there are even projects that do therapeutic baby doll things, and they kind of train people to change diapers and do this and do that, and it's an activity, and people feel a sense of meaning, they feel a sense of comfort, and that leads to other things like animals. So stuffed animals or animals with a little bit of a heartbeat or that move. Dogs and even I think otters or other things like that. There's it brings a comfort to people. If they were a dog owner or a cat owner, um, you're trying to just find what is the thing that brings them to a place of their own comfort to themselves. And so, there's tools like that. There are more, you know, slightly technical tools, like a dementia-friendly quizzes, and so it knows who you are and your age and where you grew up, and it will give you a nice and easy quiz and ask you questions about um, things that align with where you grew up, and it's interesting and it's engaging and it's fun and works on a little bit of cognitive exercise. So there's all sorts of things, coming from, sophisticated and technical using AI to know about your where you grew up and some questions you might want, all the way back to just simple, easy things. Sometimes people like puzzles, or just little crafts or painting or art. Um, Again, it comes back to that person, who they are, what their interests are, and then where they are in their progression with dementia and how much, where they still have abilities to do things
Yeah,
that
that's
they
so
love.
true, and it really just comes down to that person. There is no magic bullet in this. I mean, one thing that works for one doesn't work for another, and it depends on that person's interest. So maybe one of the best, pieces of advice is really spending a lot of time digging into, like, was that person like? What did they enjoy when they were younger? What was their career like? What did they talk about a lot of? This is one of those, activity checklist type things that we do with our clients when we're trying to figure out like goals forward. But I'm thinking you use that to decide, okay, well, how do I target out which things we want to do? Because I love the fact that when you mentioned fidget aprons, I'm thinking already in my head, was that an OT that just sewed a whole bunch of things onto things? Because it's such a typical, thing for us to be coming up with of just, okay, let's just put everything onto one place where they can look at it and see it and be able to reminisce in there. And I've heard you say too before, free solutions like music, right? Just knowing like, well, what did they like? What kind of music did they like? And could I just play that and try it and see before a shower if that calms them down more? And could we, you know, play something like, Dancing in the Rain and then enter the shower? Like, I don't know, is maybe it just depends on each person, but I think that it also comes down to the willingness of caregivers and people to take the extra time to dig deeper. What is it and how could we implement it, match the person with the right solution? And, to your point before, like to the solution for that moment in time, because they might be fine. That might work great for 2 months, and you can't just, slap your hands and go like, "Oh, we're done with that one." Like, "No, okay, we're good for right now. And here's like a list of other things that we're gonna try for later." So this is kind of like our backup list, and if this doesn't stops working, what else could we try? I mean, I know we talked also about the higher tech solutions like VRs, right? So VR can be really fun, very reminiscent therapy. I love anything to do with trying to bring back those memories, showing people like their old neighborhoods and stuff. But then, I also get ones who get freaked out when they don't have vision anymore. So, picking based on that is so important. And I think one of the things that I like about TV based is that we're so used to TV. We're not afraid of the TV. We turn it on. We're used to seeing things on there. One of the big reasons that I started using Zinnia myself was because people couldn't follow those shows. I think you mentioned earlier, that, it's focusing on a person's face longer than you would normally want to do that, and that's a good thing because that processing time is slow. It's slow for anyone in there, and when you think about how quickly TV, moves in a storyline, it's no wonder that people just get lost. They can't carry that story and understand like, "Well, wait, why are they here now? How is this?" And that just, I imagine, would create a ton of agitation in there.
Absolutely. And that is a good segue into talking about the origin story of Zinnia a little bit.
Yes.
Why we built this. And you talked about um PTs and OTs, like, putting something on, building that apron because it was a solution that they knew they needed themselves. And Zinnia is exactly that. Zinnia was a solution that was formulated by a family caregiver who saw her husband in long term care watching TV that the caregivers put on that didn't resonate with him, that he never would have chosen to watch himself. And it resulted in, tension and stress and aggravation and other things because it just wasn't meeting him where he needed to be. So, um, Zinnia is the brainchild of my partner, Allison, who cared for her husband who had frontotemporal dementia, diagnosed at 47. So very much
Wow.
different than what, you typically think was dementia. You think an older person, you think memory problems, things like that. FTD happens oftentimes with younger people. And it's less about memory and more about the executive functioning of the frontal lobe. So decision making, appropriateness, things like that. And so there's a lot of behavioral, you know, issues and challenges related to that. So, she cared for him as much as she could. She learned as much as she could about dementia to be a good caregiver, and got certified to teach, courses at Washington in the state of Washington for people living in long term care, working in long term care, and also at the University of Washington's Memory and Brain Wellness Center, where she taught primary care physicians in rural areas who don't see a lot of dementia, what it's all about, how to handle it, how to diagnose it, and taking some of the scientific expertise in Seattle and bringing it out to um, Eastern Washington. So anyway, she goes to visit Evan. He's watching something he never would have chosen. He's getting agitated. It breaks her heart to see him like that. And so she got curious and started making videos on her phone. And it started
Hmm.
with pictures of their dogs and their kids and their vacations to sit together, watch it, and talk, have a reason to interact.
Yeah.
Or even when he was nonverbal, gave them something to do. And then she realized that that was great and it was working. And there was some research literature talking about this type of content working for people with dementia. And then she decided, well, Evan likes to mountain bike and hike. Where are those videos? And so that's why we came together to build a broad catalog of videos. We have over 450 now. And the goal is to just have lots of different videos that can connect with lots of people's different interests.
Yeah. And FTP is what Bruce Willis has, isn't it?
Yeah, FTD is Bruce Willis as well. Yeah. And so I think that speaks to something more broadly in society as the incidence of dementia are increasing. I think the broad awareness of it across all of
Mm.
society is growing. When you have people like Bruce Willis and, his wife who's become extremely uh, amazing at like raising awareness and advocacy, people start to notice those things. And then you see things about dementia in the New York Times or other things, and it's just more entering the mainstream media, which gives me
Mhm.
hope that
Yeah.
the stigma is decreasing and people are understanding it more and on the lookout for it. And then now there's a whole bunch of focus on brain health as well, which is,
Yeah.
how do I, how can I reduce my chances of getting dementia?
Yeah.
And that's extremely important for caregivers, and that really is, it's what's good for your heart and what's good for your health is good for your brain. So
That's
it's
right.
exercise, it's sleep, it's nutrition, it's stress management, and it's social connection. Those are, the main things that everyone can take to be aware of and try to improve overall. And then there's lots of amazing, and this goes beyond my expertise, but amazing drug discoveries and different um, biomarkers for diagnosis that are happening right
Mhm.
now that are changing the way that people will approach treatment. So
Yeah.
just exciting overall, more broadly in society and ecosystem and in science.
And I think that is so important, like, visibility is so important for being acceptance and things like that, and, you know, diagnosis when you're a younger age is really hard. I have a friend whose mom, I think, was diagnosed about 48, and, every doc said, "No, no, no, like, that's not what it is, it's something else," because it's not on the radar, it's not what you automatically think. So getting a diagnosis is really difficult. So one of the things that I love is that we're starting to see so much of this in mainstream media. Everything from I think Seth Rogen and Hilarity for Charity. People who already have this platform are bringing information out there that is easier for people to accept because they say, "Oh yeah, okay, if they talk about that, that's true. Exercise must be related to you know my dementia health and what I eat is important and getting all of those parts are things that I want to do because I want to make sure that I have a really good quality of life later with or without dementia, right? And I think one of my favorite things is seeing like Wine Women and Dementia. I have recommended it to everybody because it is awesome in their take of it. Because I think that before this, caregivers think like, oh, I need to be perfectly put together and I don't want to talk about how difficult it is, and I laughed my butt off on this because it was so wonderful to see like real life and laughter, not real life and tears, which tend to be what clinicians view. And I love that they can laugh at it and see it and then see the community in this. So I'd love to hear from you like it, more
Yeah.
about that.
Well, so, I kinda had an inside scoop on that movie because my co-founder, Allison, is part of it, and
Ah,
I remember, she initially got connected to, the filmmaker Kitty Norton when Kitty was caregiving for her mom and chronicling it on a blog, and, you talk about, like, candor and clarity and transparency, like, she was highlighting the goods and the bads and the everything in betweens, and her way of coping with it, was, slightly irrelevant or irreverent, and funny and, not like you say, like, the tragedy narrative. Of course, it's sad and there's a lot of sorrow along with it, but you can find joy, and you can have fun moments, and you're not going to be perfect, and but you're doing the best you can. And so, when Kitty's caregiving journey was over, she decided to jump in a motorhome and drive around the country and meet other caregivers who she had met through the blog and who they created this relationship and this support for one another. And so, yes, the movie chronicles her going around the country, sitting down and having wine and having very candid conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly of caregiving. And it was a small fledgling project, and she worked really hard on it. And now you can watch it on PBS app and some PBS channels, and they had screenings in places. And so it's again one of those things that just helps to normalize caregiving a little bit.
yeah.
There's another great film that came out called, I will get that. So 3, 2, 1. Um, there's another great film called A Familiar Touch, and it was made by a first time filmmaker. And what's remarkable about it was they actually filmed it in a senior living community in California,
Wow.
and they filmed it with residents. So some people, members of the the residents were working on the set and the costumes and the lights, and they made everybody part of it. And it's a story about a son who moves his mom into a memory care community, and her adjustment and her experience there. And it really sees it through her eyes and his eyes and the staff's eyes. And it's a really honest portrayal of it. And so that got picked up by a distributor, and they're having kind of premieres and screenings all around the country. And shows another side of things. So you have like the wine women dementia is family caregivers caring for a loved one, and then this is more on the senior living side and what that's like. And so just
Yeah.
there's a Bradley Cooper movie on
Yeah.
caregiving. There's again, there's so much more in the mainstream now, and it's a great thing.
I think one of my favorite is Ice Cream in the Cupboard, even though it's not necessarily a real movie, but it really taps into the emotions of, like, the frustration of, "But you said this." "No, but that's not what I want." And so, anyway, I would say there's so much cool content out there to help you understand and help other people, be sympathetic to the struggles that people are going through. And I think that normalizes everything. And hopefully that also means more resources are going to come down into this to help solve things out of there.
Yeah.
We are getting low on time here, so I really, really love to hear just a couple things. One is, like we said, not every solution is perfect for everyone. So, can you help clinicians understand, like, what's the best way for us to match, a solution to a client's need, and times where maybe it's just not appropriate?
I think it's just trying to be aware of all the potential things that are out there, in your toolbox, and assess the situation at hand, where you are, the person, what you're trying to do, and then think about what you think is the most suitable to do and try it and see if that works. And if it doesn't work, try something else or try something else. We talked about music, right? And music is something that continues to remain. It's one of the last things that someone loses is the appreciation for music with dementia. And
Huh.
so there are there you can go on TikTok and find, an old woman who has dementia who doesn't understand anything, and then her daughter prompts her to play a piece on the piano, and all of a sudden, boom, comes back. There's a movie, back to movies again. There's a movie called Alive Inside from a few years ago, and it was talked about how someone started a project creating little iPod playlists for residents based on who they were and what they did and everything else. And they truly become alive when they listen to music from their youth. And their toes start tapping and they start singing. And this was a person who was back in the corner, not engaged with anything around them. And so, music is a really great thing. Clinicians. I was talking to an OT who was trying to get someone to exercise, and they wanted to do dancing. And so, we have a video at Zinnia called Let's Dance. And she put that on, and the person saw it, and it sort of cued them and prompted them. And then, they put on a song that the woman liked, and they got up and danced. Um, you have to read the situation and just be creative. And sometimes that's hard to do, right? Because as a clinician,
Yeah.
you're like, these are the things that I need to do, and I have to get that person to raise their hand 5 times, and everything else and it's important that they do that. Um, but sometimes, if you step back and think kind of creatively about what you might be able to do and help, that could work. There are lots of great resources on YouTube for dementia care. There's a handful of large accounts. One in particular that I really like a lot is Dementia Care Blazers with Dr. Natalie Edmonds. She has videos that help you with all sorts of different strategies and tactics and situations on how to handle them and everything. Um, and so if you have curiosity and you start digging around, you'll find lots of different resources and ideas.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, to your dancing point, have you seen that video where she was a dancer for Swan Lake and they put on the video? I mean, it'll bring you to tears. That is just amazing, but it really illustrates the power of music and how it can unlock all these things in your brain that you didn't think were still there. And so
Exactly.
I think, you know what? It's funny because it reminds me of the startup journey, which is people who are wanting to try to figure out a solution for dementia need to try something, start somewhere, try it, assess it, reassess, try something else, and then do it again. And basically you'll just keep doing it until you start to find traction in something that like this starts to work better. Okay, well, whatever works better, let's do a little bit more of that.
Yeah, and
and
that's how we developed a lot of our videos. We had, a thought of what they should look like and how we think they should work, and then we made a bunch of them, and we worked with long-term care communities and support groups and people with dementia and caregivers that Allison knew, and we would just make videos and show them and try different things and see what worked and see what didn't work and iterate from there. Like an example would be cultural relevance. So when we did our work at the University of British Columbia, one of the communities where we worked, where it was heavily Chinese in ancestry. And
Mhm.
so when we would show the let's drink water video, it's like, here's a glass of ice water with lemon in it, and someone smiling and taking a drink. And, it was okay, but it didn't resonate with what that community is used to seeing and how they consume liquids and fluids. And so, someone said, well, how about you make one with a teacup and, with a Chinese person drinking tea? And so we created footage and we put that into our video and found that with that cultural relevance, people identified with it better. And therefore, it worked better. And so it's always we're still learning as well.
Yeah.
We created some quiz content. We thought quizzes might be interesting, and it's something that is very engaging. But we have to make sure it's at the right level for someone with dementia. It's at the right pace, and we would try a topic, and so someone made an American literature quiz, and I saw that and I was like, I wonder how that's going to resonate. And, a long-term care community was using it, and they had a group of people, and they were doing the activity about literature, and there was a gentleman in the back who was, largely nonverbal. No one in the staff had ever heard him speak, and he was not participating in the activity, but he was in the room. And a question came up about Edgar Allan Poe and in the American literature quiz, and suddenly out of the back of the room, they hear this guy say, "The Raven." And they turn around, and that was the answer to the question. And then he went on to answer every question in the American literature quiz correctly. And the staff are overjoyed because they found this thing that opens the door to him. And it turns out that he was a writer for the Los Angeles Times. And so, no surprise that something like the American literature quiz would work for him. And so that just, that goes back to the trying different things, being open-minded, iterating, and always trying to figure out, what connects with that person. Like if there's an overarching theme about, I think, dementia care or our product or other products in the space, it's just, you know, be personalized, understand the person, and you kind of have to be a little bit of an investigator.
Yeah.
Another one of our stories that we heard was a woman was a volunteer, and she'd go into communities and she'd just sit with people, and she would watch videos with them as something to do. And she always noticed that this one resident got real excited anytime the farming video came on and there were sheep.
Oh.
And this volunteer was like, I wonder why sheep work for her. And so she went to the community and said, tell me about this woman. What do you know about her? And they're like, we actually don't know much about her. All we have is this address. And so this volunteer drove to the woman's address, her old home, and went and talked to the neighbors. And it turns out the neighbors told her, "Oh yeah, they kept animals, and she had these sheep, and her favorite sheep, was named Dolly." And so she came back, and the next time they were watching it, she goes, "Is that Dolly?" And all of a sudden, the woman got all excited. So it's really, it takes effort and work to try and figure out how to connect, but those moments are often repaid in spades at the feeling of joy that people are able to experience together.
So one of the things that I think is really important is just to be able to see past a person that you see with white hair sitting in a wheelchair with a blank expression on their face. There's a lot of discussion that maybe dementia patients with dementia are bored. It's not that they are vacant in their brain, but they don't have anything to do. And so it's a big part of something that I really am interested in is multi-generational connection because kids have such a great way of opening up that world. And there's a natural tendency for people to want to, you know, teach and show them and do things. And I think that when I think about my own kids, they're worried sometimes about like, what if I say the wrong thing? And what if I, like, what if they just start crying because like I touched on something really big? And I'm kind of thinking, I'm wondering from your perspective with Zinnia, like, is that something that you need to think about as well? Things like, overwhelm or, what could you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, to some extent, Zinnia is a response to the overwhelm that comes from regular TV. Sometimes, if you walk into a long term care community, you'll see the cable news on, and you talk about stimulation and overwhelm. There are triggering topics. Sometimes people can't tell fact from fiction. They need, a slower, more gentle media experience, and that's what we've built. So I think multi-generational is super important as well, as you mentioned. We have instances of people watching Zinnia with their grandkids, and it gives them a common ground to connect about. Family visits in senior living can sometimes be nerve wracking and stressful for the family because they come and they say, "Well, what are we going to do? Or what are we going to talk about? How are we going to pass the time?" And this gives them a way to choose a topic. Like we know mom loved to sew, so we'll put on the sewing video, and mom who doesn't want to interact and be responsive will hear the snip of the scissors, and suddenly her eyes perked up and she started watching, and then we had a really nice visit together. So that's a really a good way to use Zinnia and tools like that.
I love it. I think it's just so important. The more tools that you have in your toolbox, the better. You can deploy them at different times. If it's raining, you need something. If it's sunny, you need something else. So it's just great to at least have options to be able to pull those from. I just want to wrap up this today's discussion. It's just been amazing. What are those three takeaways that clinicians could use for their practice for tomorrow?
I think number one is just, we said it over and over again. Try to find out as much as you can about your person that you're serving, and try to connect into that. Try to find things that resonate with that. Also, be aware and try to educate yourself on specifics of dementia and the challenges involved and what the person is perceiving, so you can be thoughtful about how you approach that person. It's funny, segue, but you talked about VR, right? And sometimes like VR isn't great for people with dementia because they have this thing on their head and they're immersed in something, and then they take it off and they're not there anymore. What VR is particularly good at, though, is training for clinicians. And so there are a couple of products out there that a clinician can wear and go through something like a person with dementia and understand how what it's like to perceive the world as someone with dementia, and it sort of trains empathy in order to help that person, the clinician, to be more mindful of the person they're serving and how they can do that better. So personalization, empathy, and education about what that person is going through, and um, being open to trying different things to figure out what works. We know that there can be some tried and true things. That woman loved the baby's video and that always worked for her, but there can also be surprises. Some people feel strongly that just because someone has dementia doesn't mean that their interest in novel and new experiences disappears. So, don't be afraid to try something that might be different, and you might find that they enjoy that. We have a video about humor, and it's silly, but you put it on, and certain people just laugh out loud for 10 minutes straight, and it reduces the stress around an activity. It gives people joy together, and it gives the caregiver happiness to see their person happy.
Yeah, those are all such great ideas for people. How can people reach you if they want to learn more or have other questions?
Sure. Well, I can be reached most directly at my email, bill@zinniatv.com. And then Zinnia has, our website is zinniatv.com, and we're on all the social media platforms. And I can be found on LinkedIn, but it's under William A. Uniowski, not Bill, because my dad's Bill. So if you email him, you'll get a polite response saying, "I think you may be looking for my son."
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Thanks again to Bill for the insight takeaways related to caring for loved ones with dementia. We'd like to note that this episode is intended for educational purposes only and does not represent an endorsement of any specific company or product. We reference types of solutions, but these are there to inform clinical decision making and not to promote specific brands. Hope to see y'all next time. Thanks for tuning in to Innovative Aging by MedBridge. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, your favorite podcast platform, or listen directly at medbridge.com. If you'd like to earn continuing education credit and access bonus resources from this episode, just log in to your MedBridge account and search for the show title to get started. And we'd love to hear from you. If there's a topic you want us to explore or a guest you'd love to hear from, reach out via Instagram or email us at podcasts@medbridge.com. Thank you for the work you do and for joining us as we explore what it truly means to age in place. See you next time.